Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Benjamin Premack, and I'm one of your hosts from IGDA Seattle this evening. I've got a bit of information about tonight's panel and about a $500 donation, which will be made in honor of tonight's panelists to an organization that was nominated by the panelists, but which you, the audience, will pick. So, thank you very much for attending tonight's panel on engineering leadership in the video game industry. Becoming is an ongoing partnership between IGDA Seattle and Diversity Collective to highlight diverse video game industry leaders and to hear their stories. A little about your host tonight. First, we have IGDA Seattle, which is a chapter of the International Game Developers Association, a professional association and global network of game developers with the mission of empowering game developers around the world to achieve fulfilling and sustainable careers. Diversity Collective is a community within Seattle Indies with the mission of supporting diversity and inclusion for minorities in game development. We have the opportunity tonight to learn from 4 experienced and diverse leaders in technology and engineering. Each and every one of them is eager to share their story with you. Post your questions to Twitch, and the moderator will ask them during the Q&A at the end of the panel. In addition, you have the opportunity tonight to pick one of the following organizations to receive a $500 donation in honor of the panelists. The 4 organizations are America Needs You, Save the Children, the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project, and the Equal Justice Initiative. Visit our Twitch or look for the link in the chat log to vote on which one of these organizations will receive the donation. This donation is sponsored by Seattle Indies and by my law firm, the firm of Premack Rodgers. Thank you to all of our panelists tonight for joining us, and thank you to the IGDA for re-hosting tonight's event. I hope you will find tonight's panel both educational and encouraging as you pursue your own career paths in the video game industry. And with that, I'll pass the mic to tonight's moderator, Sarah.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm a 3D generalist and tech artist at Spryfox, and one of the co-founders of Diversity Collective. And one of the board members for the Seattle Indies, which is why I'm here today. I'd like to go around first and introduce all of our panelists before we get started. So I'll start with Evie.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Evie Powell. I'm the lead virtual reality engineer at Proprio. Proprio is actually a medical device company that is building solutions for surgeons to improve their ability to do and see things intraoperatively, so during actual surgery. And so that's what I do, my day job. I'm also a virtual reality game developer. I founded Verge of Brilliance, which is a local experimental game studio. Where I build lots of fun experiments, game and play-oriented experiences, and just have a lot of fun doing whatever I want. So yeah, that's me. I also am a really big advocate for things like mentoring. I myself mentor a few different students. And as well as just broadening participation in computing in general across women and underrepresented minorities.
Thank you. Abdullah, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Abdullah Hamed, or Abdullah Hamid in Arabic, and I am a community PM at .NET with Microsoft. And what I do is manage engineering communities and advocate for them. I help educate them and teach them new techniques and fun things to do with .NET when creating games. And that's my day job, which is great, and I love it. But in the past, I was an entrepreneur. I started a game business in Saudi Arabia for a while. I'm a big advocate for some subgroups in the Arabic game development community, and I try to advocate for them. And yeah, I'm just an overall generalist who mostly focuses on programming, I guess.
Thanks. And Ayo, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi. My name is Orimoloye. I'm a lead graphics software engineer at Magic Leap. Magic Leap is basically a spatial computing device company, which is a fancy way of just saying XR and virtual, kind of virtual reality-ish stuff. And we're a startup based in Florida, and I work out of the Los Angeles office. Prior to Magic Leap, I was part of the PlayStation VR launch team, helped to launch the PSVR. And before that, I worked at a whole bunch of other gaming studios and also Qualcomm, also working at the advanced content and gaming team at Qualcomm. So most of my 20 plus year career has been in video games, but now I'm kind of doing the startup unicorn thing. So.
And last but not least, Luis.
Hi, I'm Luis Angel Mex. I'm a software engineering lead in Turn 10 Studios. We make Forza Motorsport for Xbox. And I'm currently leading a team of 15 software engineers, and we mostly handle essentially code and 3D content pipeline systems and pipelines to essentially merge and build the game that we ship. And so I'm constantly collaborating with other engineers, with technical artists, 3D artists, audio engineers, etc. So essentially, we collaborate with the whole studio to make the game happen. And prior to that, I was an engineering lead as well in Minecraft and Xbox avatars. And before that, I've been all over the place within the Xbox organizations, where I started back in 2010. And today is actually a very special day for all of us at Team Xbox, because we just shipped this.
Oh snap!
Yeah, and so I've been in the org for a while, so I just wanted to show off my love for Xbox. And here's my little stack of consoles from 1S, 1X, Series S, and Series X. So I'm super happy right now. This is a very great way for me to close a very happy day. So, yeah.
Awesome! Congratulations on the launch as well. I want to get an idea when we start off to talk about what your focus in engineering is now and how that has changed from the first job that you had in the industry. Saying engineering lead is relatively broad, so how that actually translates to what you're doing and where you started, I'm curious to hear. And maybe we can go in the same order. Evie, if you'd like to start.
Sure. So a little bit about what it means to be a lead, I guess. I guess the first half of that question was sort of what was the trajectory to get to that point, which is pretty much, I don't know. I think I've always kind of been a lead type person. I've done PM roles before, and a lot of it is just sort of synchronizing a large team. At least for my job, it's basically synchronizing all of the work that is coming together from all of my engineers into what is going to be like a release candidate or feature or something like that. So there are a lot of people building at the same time, organizing all of that effort, making sure it comes in a way that can be parallelized when it can be, and then is in the correct serial order when it needs to be that. It's a lot of just sort of making sure that the product comes together in a way that makes sense. And so I spend a lot of my time sort of organizing and creating architecture documents and things of that nature, as well as building out code. But to me, that's like the fun part of it, is just sort of thinking about how everything is supposed to come together. And building games is really what sort of enabled me to do that, because as an indie game developer, when I first sort of started in that space, you kind of have your hands on all of the different parts. Especially with a small studio, you tend to wear many hats. So I have a lot of experience sort of doing the program management bit, as well as the design bit and the creative direction bit and all of that. And so me being able to think about it big picture is really something that I've used as a feature for myself. Yeah.
And Abdullah, the same question for you, just to get a little more context about what it is that you're working on now as an engineering lead, and how this has changed over time since you started your career.
Sure. So I wouldn't call myself an engineering lead anymore, because my current job is mostly focused on helping other engineers and educating other engineers externally. But I also do, I'm a PM. So what I do is coordinate between engineers and between marketing people and between content creators, and just kind of create this like cohesive message within .NET for game developers. Even like going into game development communities, talking to like open source library maintainers, and trying to really understand what they need and what they want, and how can we help them, and try to communicate that back to the engineers. So I wouldn't call myself a lead anymore, even though I was in the past, and I did do that. When I had my own company, I kind of created I created a game portal for Arabic game developers for a while. And so I hired some engineers. So kind of was an engineering lead during that time. But currently I'm mostly focused on trying to make sure that game developers have the right tools for them to succeed.
Same question for you. I know you're talking about the translation that your career has taken through being in game development and now in a sort of game development adjacent role for engineering. And I'm curious to hear more about that.
Right. So at Magic Leap, I'm actually working on a lot of like Vulkan, OpenXR, pipe, just the graphics pipeline for mostly performance optimization and debugging. And it's kind of ironic because I started about 20 years ago at a small company called Signosis in London, and I was working on performance and debugging. So it's funny because my focus hasn't really changed. So it's just like, I've changed from working on 386 assembly to much more high level Vulkan and OpenXR, and just gone from 16-bit assembly language to like 64 bits like high level languages. So it's kind of interesting how when I think about it, like this is actually a very interesting question, because it's like, yeah, my focus hasn't really changed, even though I'm now a lead. I kind of transitioned for a while. I was at Vivendi Games about 10 years ago, and I was like a technical director at that point. So that was like a whole bunch of just traveling to a whole bunch of developers and talking to them about PlayStation 3, I believe it was at the time, and just SPU evangelizing. So I think all those roles have kind of just meshed into my current role at Magic Leap. And so I kind of evangelize the Magic Leap, GPU and CPU, same as I did on, PlayStation with the SPUs, and going all the way back to like PS1 with like the PS2 with the vector units and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting, like, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Awesome. Luis, the same question for you.
Hi. So I think for me, the journey to the leadership position I have now was basically it happened in a somewhat organic way, and it's not something that I actually planned to or was aiming from the start of my career. I actually early on, I joined Microsoft about 15 years ago in Office. And back then, I think the culture was a little more of the old school software development culture, where pretty much everybody on a leadership position had to be, loud and angry, and like not the greatest leadership culture. And so I wasn't really interested in that, but I was interested obviously in building great products, great software, and eventually found a way into joining Xbox. So fast forward to like 2015, 2016, and And so we were building Xbox avatars, avatars being, a 3D character that you can customize is a way of identity for within Xbox Live. And we're building and trying to make it like super inclusive, super diverse, having tons of customization options, etc. Right? And we're building it pretty much from the ground up. And one of the portions of the engineering stack that I own was about just the customization engine and the tooling to create clothing items and accessories and stuff. And turns out that we actually got into this negative loop with the art team, because essentially engineering was not getting the right 3D content to validate and test the engine and the tools. And the artists were not getting what they needed from our tools and our engine to be able to essentially create content. And like it was really bad. Like we're like, are these not good artists? And then the artists were like, are these not good engineers? And I think it just came very natural to me to start trying to essentially assume best intent from all parties involved and try to see what was what were the issues. And it turns out it was purely communication styles and collaboration issues. Like it had nothing to do with our skill set. I think everybody was really talented and brilliant. And so essentially I started taking a role of still, driving the technology forward, but at the same time trying to find all the connection points to that technology. And a lot of that had to do with the art and our production team. And so through that, basically, that we managed to turn around, and then I started essentially increasing scope in the sense that there were other problems similar to that, and I think that's somewhat common in the gaming industry, this collaboration across multiple disciplines. And so I just started taking more and more ownership of those ambiguous, technical leadership collaboration type problems. And eventually I was assigned the role to lead the whole avatars team. And then through that, after we launched, I found a similar opportunity in Minecraft, and after that now in Forza Motorsport. And I think my role today is kind of like three parts, especially in the portion of the technology stack where my team sits. One is essentially what I described just now, just driving that collaboration enabled by technology, right, across all the disciplines that form the studio. Another one is just provide the focus for my team to essentially go after the critical problems that we need to solve. And so, because we are in the middle of super cutting edge stuff. And so everybody wants super excited about something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to pursue all these, 12, 15 different, priorities, right? So a lot of that is figuring out what are the engineering priorities for the team to go after those first. And then the third one, I'd say the third part of my focus is just building a very strong team. I value a lot bringing diverse candidates, but also the inclusion that comes with that, and making sure that all voices are heard, and that I can push those careers forward. And so, yeah, so.
A lot of you mentioned as well in your intros that you are working in mentoring and helping to educate and train young engineers, and I'm curious how you're seeing junior engineers enter the industry now, and if that has changed since the time that you entered the industry, whether this is through mentorships, through applications or networking, or directly through college applications, or from college programs nearby. And this is an open question for anybody.
I can talk a little bit about that. I think yes, the different ways to get into the industry, I think they have changed. I think there is there are more options now, which is great. There's obviously the app marketplaces for the different mobile platforms that has, and the fact that pretty much anybody with a basic computer can go and create stuff that makes it easier to show off your passion, and then basically be able to find jobs that eventually get you to the industry. I actually joined. I didn't have any gaming experience before I joined Xbox. I joined through Xbox.com, where I work on avatars for the web, and just I learned from there, a bunch of stuff. I think there are more avenues. That also means there's more, there's more skilled candidates, looking for positions. And so in that sense, I think Microsoft, we are very committed to that, and I think other companies, like just from top of my mind, I know Niantic is very, very committed to that, as well as several other big gaming companies. In the case of Microsoft, we try to hiring diverse talent doesn't mean bringing people of all different shapes and colors and check the boxes and you're done. It's actually going and taking the time to go and build the networks at the schools, the communities that exist, like this community, and then expand that funnel without lowering the hiring bar for those candidates, right? And the talent will bubble to the top, right? And right now it takes a little more effort, because we have traditionally ignored a lot of those groups and communities, and so for the long term, I think the investment is actually on building connections with the colleges, with schools, etc., right? So that talent is detected and pushed forward earlier on, right? Along with that, Microsoft also does a lot of diverse hiring for people with in the autism spectrum, people with disabilities, etc., right? And those actually are a huge win for the company, because through the trainings that the hiring managers and interviewers get to get the best out of the candidates, we also get a lot of communication, collaboration, and empathy skills, which are incredibly valuable in this industry.
Yeah, second what you said, Microsoft is heavily invested in diversity and making sure that they hire diverse talent. I've been seeing a lot of junior engineers these days in the game industry coming in, and that's great. There is almost saturation of engineers in the game industry. Also, there's a lot of competition, and that I feel like that makes it harder, like compared to like when I was trying to get into engineering positions at that time, because engines are pretty much free and open source and whatnot, and so people can learn really quickly and they can enter the industry learning a lot and knowing a lot about how to make games. The resources online are insane, the amount of knowledge out there. So it's exciting seeing the junior talent coming in just ready to start engineering. But I think one of the things that are lacking that I see from junior developers might be more from like in the collaboration sense. They don't have those skills yet. They haven't been part of bigger teams and haven't gotten a lot of criticism, I should say, and how to take criticism, how to use criticism to improve and grow. And I feel like that's kind of a thing that I noticed.
Right. And when I was at EA, I worked on this game called GoldenEye Rogue Agent, and we had an intern, and she actually came back to the company and ended up working at EA in the Bay Area. So there's definitely those avenues available for juniors coming in. Same thing at Magic Leap, just like Louis said, we have a lot of people coming in via code jams and just making apps on like anything that sets you apart from the other people, like just having an app like a demo or something that shows off your programming skills always helps, especially in the game industry, because the gaming industry is notoriously very closed off, kind of like Hollywood. So you almost always have to know someone in there to get your foot in the door. But anything that you can do that helps you get that foot in the door always helps.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll second that idea, the sentiment about doing the things that can set you apart. So that was sort of my sort of rule of thumb. Like while I was a beginner and a student, and then moving into actual a professional career. That was something that I was constantly looking to do, because I came from it started out as a traditional education program, which was a 4-year college where I studied computer science and did that thing. But you'll you'll quickly realize when you're in school that your competition is everyone around you. And if they're all taking the same classes and doing the same projects, you doing, taking that initiative, doing something outside of the context of a classroom is going to, really look different compared to the resumes of all of your peers. And so that was something that I was constantly trying to do, was like, okay, yeah, I took real-time rendering and intro to graphics and all of these other things, but it's like, if there's 50 to 100 people that did the same thing looking for the same job, what can I do to distinguish myself? So I'd say that that was something that really helped, and something that I actually now look into while I'm hiring others and bringing people onto my teams. Is, what are they doing? What are they, what are they passionate about? Like, is this something that can keep their interest for longer than a few months, that kind of thing. And so I'm looking for the, the core skills and the hard skills, but I'm also looking for the demonstrations of soft skills, demonstrations of initiative, things like that, leadership. But on the other end, as far as like bringing in people from diverse backgrounds and things like that, there's also a need for the companies, because they're bringing in people that, maybe checked a different box, or they are coming from a different space. You have to, you have to be very aware and meaningful about the environment and the culture that you're creating in a company. Because like, it's one thing to get a person, a woman or a woman of color or whatever in the door. But if it feels hostile, she's not going to stick around. If it feels hostile for the person that is representing that sort of diversity that that company is looking for, then, like, you just have to be aware of the culture of, what the day-to-day is going to be like for that person. I hear way too many stories about someone getting the job of their dreams and then just hating it, not necessarily because of the stuff that they're doing. They love the stuff they're doing, but they hate the environment and they hate the work environment. And it's such a shame when we lose women engineers and, people of color just because of that. So I think that, there's two sides that are working together sort of to create and change the face of industry right now.
Going off of that same point, Evie, and this is an open question for anybody, I'm interested in hearing how you're changing the structures within the industry to see more diverse people enter engineering, enter STEM programs, enter engineering at all.
Well, I can bite. Not many people in Arabic countries really can think, or even have the luxury of thinking that, hey, I want to be in games. Companies don't exist there. The companies that do exist there are very small, and they're very lean, and they are barely making any money. So it's really hard for somebody from those places to really think of it even as a career choice. So to me, just being visible really to those people is important to me. Like, yeah, it might look like I'm just advertising for myself and I'm just being egotistical, but really, like, just being visible allows them to think that, hey, like, this is a career choice that I can that is valid. And like, I do give workshops, I do teach people, I do mentor people who reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter is always open. The DMs are open and people can message me anytime they want. And there's a lot of Arabic, either kids or students, who message me and ask me things. And sometimes they're ridiculous questions, but just having somebody answer them gives validity to their dreams and what they really want to do with their lives.
Yeah, I want to tag on to what you just said there. Is one of the things that I participate in, and I really strongly encourage other people to do the same, is what part of what helped me get through my school versus and then going into my professional career was having someone that I call a champion. And so I think that in industry, everyone has a champion. They just don't know it. Maybe they don't realize it, because what it means to me, a champion is a person that from day to day, you can go to talk about your concerns, that ultimately just believes you belong where you are. And so, it's not a role to play for someone. Being a mentor is part of that role. But I do think that people that are coming from these underrepresented groups have to be explicit about finding that person, because it's, you're rare. And so maybe not everyone 100% believes. Maybe they are, they're part of that. Oh, well, I've never seen a Black female in that role. Maybe she'll do great, but, you don't want to just go to work every day, just constantly having people think maybe. You want to have at least one person on your side saying that, yeah, I believe wholeheartedly that this person can do X, Y, and Z, the role and fulfill the role and responsibilities of their title. And so, for people that are sort of represented or representing sort of diverse groups, I always recommend explicitly going out and finding that person, finding your mentor, finding that person you can talk to on a regular basis that says, ultimately, here's maybe where you're doing things wrong. Here's the shortcut, because I've been where you are. And, maybe you're getting pushed back because of X, Y, and Z, and maybe they've never seen it come out of a person like you before. Somebody that can just really help you sort of understand your trajectory, the choices that you're making from day to day, and how it relates to the environment that you're working in. So to me, that's very important.
Yep, I totally agree with Evie, and it can't be overemphasized how important it is just to see someone in a leadership position that kind of looks like you. It's like, hey, if that guy could get there, then maybe you don't have much of this imposter like complex, which is one of the things that you go through. Like, if as a junior person, once you get into the industry, you're like, oh wow, like, I can't believe I'm working with these guys. These guys were my gods. I used to play games made by these guys, and I'm working in this company making games alongside these guys, and they're paying me to do it. Like, it's just amazing. So it's always good to have that mentor, that can guide you through those kind of like thoughts and just make sure that you can succeed in your career. And it's really very important. And luckily it's getting better than, when I was starting. So.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to add is regarding the product that you're building, the games that you're building. Also make sure that they appeal to a diverse audience in an inclusive manner. I think gaming companies are starting to realize how much business potential there is on doing that. Actually, it's not just the right thing to do, it's actually really good for business. It simplifies other problems, it increases revenue, etc. Right? Like simple examples like gaming titles that took the time to do like adaptive font size for people with visual disabilities, and those titles, they're set to work on mobile devices, via systems like xCloud, for example, right? Like if you did it, and then that's the magic of inclusive design, where you solve a problem and then you gain a lot from solving that problem, right? And there are I have a ton of examples that of similar things with avatars, when we try to be build a system that was inclusive with prosthetics, with wheelchairs, etc., right? And by solving those problems, everything else in the system got better. The production of 3D content got easier, and that's money, right? That is revenue, right? And so just building those inclusive products, putting them in front of an audience that attracts more people in the industry, and if those features are bringing in revenue, that also convinces skeptics about diversity and inclusion. They're like, well, maybe they won't do it because it's the right thing to do, but they'll do it if it's bringing money in here, and that helps as well, right? So yeah, so definitely closing that loop with with a diverse and inclusive product is always great.
What you said, Evie, about finding a champion and a mentor for you just hit me in the gut really badly, actually, because like I don't have that these days. It's a challenge trying to find somebody that does understand your struggle, that does like, or knows your background, knows kind of the things that you go through. If I may ask you, how do you think is like the best way to find somebody like that?
Well, I found one of mine. I'd say the first one that I found was in college. So conveniently, she was my PhD advisor. And so, yeah, and even that industry is sort of male dominated. And when you get into computer science, yeah, there's not very many there. And so I'd say that for me, that worked well because the way we connected was similar. And you kind of have to be picky about this person because not everybody interprets the same things the same way. And so, yeah, for me, it was just really convenient because, you know, she interpreted things similarly to me. And so when I would, you know, have a feeling that, you know, why am I being told that I need to, you know, take notes in my class project? And it's like, okay, well, there might be some preconceived notions that women that join computer science teams or programming teams are automatically going to play the role of secretary, you know? So it's just like, you know, things like that, where it's just like, you know, well, is this normal? Is this, you know, is this something I need to pay attention to? You know, you can have this person to sort of bounce those ideas off of, saying that, oh no, you actually need to change your behavior because you're, you know, you need to develop this soft skill, or actually maybe this is a product of, you know, your environment and the preconceived notions that people are coming into this experience with. And so from there, I've had several other, you know, people come into my life that have played that type of role for me. Either being a person that's in a higher position that can sort of tell me sort of as a way of pulling me up, or a person that's on that same level, a peer mentor, where we can just sort of sit around and, you know, just say, well, let's see, GDC is actually a great example of this. So I go there, or I used to go there every year. And part of one of the things that I would do there was I would meet with like sort of birds of the feather group. There was one where it was just like all women PhD game developers. There's like 6 of us. And that was just a great opportunity for us to just all sit around and just talk about our experiences and what it's like to be that minority in game industry right now. And it just really helps. Yeah.
I'm curious, like for Evie or for anyone else, like what other systems you have either within your teams at your studio or within the game industry as a whole for you to act as that person for somebody else, and to support like the technical growth of your junior engineers or people at GDC who aren't in your studio but are trying to get into games. Do you have systems for this that you're currently working in, and how have you built those up? How do you find those people?
Yeah, I can start. So there's a couple of things that I've done. So I've worked actually with Cami and mentored a student from the AIE. I've also mentored at Duke University. And so there's like, let's see, the organization I'm originally from, like as an undergraduate student, is an organization on the East Coast called Stars Alliance. And it's all about broadening participation and just getting more underrepresented minorities into these computing and programming roles, and trying to create programs that sustain this. And so while I was in that program, I learned a lot about how you can start to create these types of experiences and these types of groups, you know, as you go off and start your career other places. Things like mentorship programs, which I'm really, really into. Also things like peer mentorship and the value of that. You know, setting up events, actually largely like this one. And then also when you're actually building a company, what are the things that you do to sort of manage the culture and grow a company into being something that, promotes bringing people from all walks of life. And so a lot of it is as simple as, making sure, I think it was Ayo that said, making sure that you have leadership that looks like you, that looks, that can represent those different groups. I'm not entirely sure who said it, but yeah, like that's a big part of it, is like, as your company grows, are you being mindful of the types of groups as their representation as people grow into leadership positions, or as you bring in new leadership from other places. Just also just making sure that the culture is one where people feel like they can thrive. So for me, I've always been a fan of like a very academic culture where everyone, no matter what discipline you're in, is sort of sharing information, sharing knowledge together. So that even if you're even if you're like an expert in one area, you're learning about some of the other areas that make your company work. Sort of that round table approach of sharing knowledge, sort of being able to share research papers and then talk about like what you read and how you interpreted it. A lot of people might think that that's sort of overkill, but at the end of the day, if you've got a designer that is sitting in on those same meetings that, maybe a programmer or a robotics engineer or something like that, that might be something that a designer comes up with, an idea that a robotics engineer just wouldn't have come up with. And that's ultimately, I think, what the companies are looking for. They're not just looking to fill in seats of different colors and shapes and sizes. They're interested in your experiences and the things that you've done and brought into, coming from your life experiences and feeding that into the product. Because when you have diverse thought like that, that makes better products. Like, that's just proven time and time again.
Right. So same thing when we have on my graphics team, we have team summits. So we basically have junior and senior engineers presenting what they've worked on. We have it's kind of like a conference format. So exactly what Evie is talking about. So there's like two-way feedback. There's feedback from the junior engineers. There's feedback from the senior engineers. You know what everybody is working on. We have paired code reviews. There's a lot of ways you can have technical growth for the junior engineers by being exposed to and constantly working with, the senior engineers. So that's really how you address those kind of issues. You basically just send them to conferences. We have workshops. So we have as many of these events as possible. Will, like maybe 4 times a year, twice a year. It doesn't really, as long as you keep doing them and the junior engineers feel engaged and they feel like they're giving valuable feedback to the company and to the team, then they feel like they're making a difference. And exactly as Evie said, they don't feel like they're just this seat that's just, we just need a warm body to fill the seat. Like some teams do that. So a lot of gaming teams, a lot of gaming companies are very notorious for being like, just cranking out, just burning through junior engineers. I don't want to name names, but I've worked at some of them. And so this is one thing that I'm happy to say, as I've gone to more and more GDCs, I've seen like this is something that's changing in the industry. Like maybe 5-10 years ago in the industry, the view of junior engineers was just basically just cannon fodder, just use them for like crunch mode and then burn them out. And then they just get tossed out of the industry. But now I think a lot of these companies have started like really investing in their junior engineers. So it's a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah, I'll just throw in there that exact example of like, companies chewing up their junior devs and spitting them out is exactly why I think people need that champion and need that mentor. Because, if you're just coming in blind and you've got nobody that's sort of advocating for you, you don't know if you're being abused by a company. It really takes being able to talk to other people and talk to peers and people that are also, you know, working in a similar industry but at a different company, or you know, someone that has been where you are in your particular company. Like, it takes that person to say, no, that doesn't sound quite right. Like, you know, that doesn't sound like something you should be living through. You should find somewhere else that appreciates you more. And as you know, the industry has become more open and accessible to people, and you know, GDC and like type programs are becoming bigger and more present sort of across the country. You can see that junior devs have more of the resources, not all of them, but they have more of the resources to actually sort of compare notes and say, oh yeah, this is what it's like, you know, working at this company. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm having a terrible experience. Maybe I want to move there, you know? And so, I mean, and I think that's great for the devs that have to sort of, you know, navigate that world. And it's also forces companies to be better. Because like I said, like, you know, if they get you for a year or two and then you sort of bail out because you're burned out, like, it's not great for the company either. They've done all of this investment and, you know, taught you all of these things, and you're just going to take it and go somewhere else with it. And so, yeah, you know, having this type of like shared experience where people can sort of share and compare notes with each other is just better for everyone involved.
One thing that's relative. Oh, sorry, Abdullah, go ahead if you have something you want to add.
Yeah, you were asking about what are we doing to like mentor other people, or at least help other folks in the industry. I always found it hard to mentor other people because like Io said, imposter syndrome is a thing, and it will never go away. Like, it will always be there lurking behind the shadows, and you will always feel like you don't fit in, and like your opinions are not valuable, your skills are not valuable. And at least that's how I deal with it. I feel it. And so it's really hard for me to see myself as a mentor to help others beyond like the basics, beyond like teaching them how to program or what's the best engine to use or whatever, you know, stuff like that. And so it's really hard for me to see myself as a mentor, but it's something that I have to push through. It is something that I just have to lie to myself almost, of just like, yeah, like I act like I believe in myself until I do, and mentor people and teach people until I feel confident about mentoring and teaching people. But it's always a struggle, and it's always going to be there. But the idea is to keep yourself open to those possibilities, and you know, and push through the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, and you all have so much to add, which is why you're here today. But yeah, you should. I hope, Abdullah, I hope you can feel more confident mentoring people because you have so many unique things to share.
Well, it's my job right now, so great.
Yeah. So I want to ask one thing that's relatively unique to the engineering part of game design is your process with technical interviews. And I'm curious why technical interviews are such an important process for hiring new engineers. And I'm curious to hear how you make them effective and accessible for different kinds of people.
I can start. It's this one. I think for me, I think I'm representing the studio. I'm representing Turn 10. The real value on those technical interviews is, it's not so much about can this person code, or does this person have the software engineering skills? Because most likely by the time you're getting to the interview stage, you have proven that you can code, either, you know, school or previous interviews or previous experience or whatever, right? The real value is, can this software engineer apply these skills and knowledge to complex, ambiguous problems, and collaborate with other people that may or may not understand code to, you know, deliver, great features, great gameplay, great tools, great art for the game, right? Like essentially there's a lot of how do you go beyond, essentially copy pasting code from Stack Overflow or something like that. How do you go beyond that and in actually, thinking about how the problem you're trying to solve is helping move forward the studio, right? And so a lot of my interviews and what I try to also do with other interviews in the studio or suggest to other interviewers in the studio, it's whatever it is you ask, make sure that there's more of a conversation with the candidate, right? Like there should be code at the end of the interview, right? There should be working code. There should be, elegant code, simple, right? But the process to get through that code is as interesting as the code itself, right? Like, are they asking questions? Are they trying to understand what problem you're trying to solve? What's the audience, right? What are, are there limitations? Are they being critical of how they're evaluating, oh, well, these two solutions seem good. One is more performant in a way than the other, but the other one maybe has lower cost of maintenance, etc. Right? So obviously, like in a 60-minute or 45-minute interview, you cannot solve all the problems in the world, right? But with that small ambiguous problem that you may be asking the candidates, you want to see how they essentially engineer a solution that is efficient, that is scalable, that is actually solving the problems for the customer, and then see the working code at that. So I think the value is in that it's can they evaluate these ambiguous problems? Can they collaborate in that case with the interviewer to get to a solution, and then can they deliver that solution within the time, right?
Right, and to agree with Lewis, yeah, basically we kind of measure one of the advantages or disadvantages, if you, depending on your perspective of the technical side of game development, is the fact that yes, you can actually measure, like this is something we are basically just trying to measure if the person knows what they're doing, at the interview. So that's like, unlike the artist side or the sound guy, where it's more kind of like nebulous. With technical interviews, that's really the difference is, yes, at least you can say, hey, I aced that interview and I didn't get the job. So there must be some kind of question mark, why didn't I get the job? Right. So that's one of the advantages of technical interviews, is the fact that if you do well in a technical interview, then there's really no reason why you shouldn't get the job. Right. And most gaming teams have like this gauntlet style, which I really hate, where they have you meet like 8 people and you talk to 8 different people on the team and they ask you like all these technical questions, and it's like really like it just grinds out an entire day. And it's like they basically, the reason, I don't know why gaming companies like to do that. At Magic Leap, we kind of like have a much simpler method where we basically just have, we're still kind of similar to the gauntlet interview style, but it's kind of like, I tend to focus, for example, on performance and optimization, my area of expertise. There are other people who focus on linear algebra and stuff like that. Some people focus on C++ skills. So, as long as you have those things, you're probably going to do well and pass the interview. So you really shouldn't worry about technical interviews. It's just that I feel it's a bit unfair to have these like long grinding, like, like gauntlet style interviews, but it seems like they're here to stay in the gaming industry. So that's just how it is. But the one easy way to get through those is just basically, as Louis said, there's a lot of like, books, and you can actually prepare yourself for those style interviews because they're very common. Like a lot of not just gaming companies, but tech companies in the Bay Area tend to use that style. So it's kind of like the advantage of that is, yes, you can actually prepare for those style interviews. I actually prefer to take candidates through the interviews that I tend to give candidates. I take them through like, here's a problem we had at work. Here's like a bug that was submitted by the QA team. And what would you do to fix it? And exactly like Louis said, you basically want to see how the person solves that problem. And it's actually related to what they will be doing at the company rather than, how do you move Mount Fuji and all those other kind of weird interviews that some companies like to focus on.
Yeah. I'll say that the key things about interviews that I've learned over the years, and then sort of what I'm thinking when I'm giving interviews. I'm looking for a technical baseline. So, if it's a technical position, like if you're looking for a role as like the technical artist or something like that, I'm going to look for baselines. Do you know what a shader is? Like sort of how these things are put together. And after that, it's like the other said, it's less about like, this declarative knowledge you have, like of knowing what these pieces are and these components are, and really just sort of seeing how you tackle a problem, especially if it's a problem you're not familiar with. One thing I'm very careful of, and I think my company is very careful of, is making sure that the interview questions are along the person's technical baseline, but also the things that they said that they can do in their resume. So I tend to tailor my questions towards, okay, this person says they're an expert in, JavaScript or C# or something like that. So maybe I might tailor my question around that. What are some of the certain components of the C# code? Like, how would you build this class and this interface and this, that kind of thing. If they say that they're great at databases and database design, I'm going to ask them a question about that. And so at that point, I'm looking to make sure that I got what I signed up for, and that this person isn't lying to me. Honesty is what I'm looking for. So when someone gets a question from me that they don't understand or it's outside of their technical knowledge, I would much rather them say, well, my knowledge about this ends here. Based off of what I know, maybe I'll do this. I really don't like it if somebody tries to BS their way through a technical interview. So, for me, it's about like, once you establish that baseline, it's really just about sort of making sure that this is a person that can solve complex problems. You put a question in front of them and they're asking the right questions. Like, so don't feel like you have to go into a technical interview knowing all the answers off the bat. You can say, well, can you clarify this? Or are you looking for this? Especially when you get into, these sort of hybrid design roles, asking questions is key. As a PM, asking questions is key. You have to know what you're supposed to deliver before you deliver it. I just say, stay honest, stay open, ask questions, and stay engaged.
The last interview that I went through was my favorite. It was a series. It was about 5 different people, a rotation, like a full day. But I started with a problem that they gave me the day before and told me, hey, you're going to come in. This is a hypothetical situation. We're going to ask you about it. And that's it. It was very vague, and it was just one day, so I didn't have like time to prepare. But the next day, it was pretty much a series of meetings as if I was working with a team that trying to solve the problem, and then going one step at a time with a different team from a different department kind of thing, and kind of simulates working with me. And I really like that. I was very comfortable because I felt like that was my strong points. That's part of my strong points, is the ability to do that. And it was just reflective of the actual work you're going to do.
I totally like that. That sounds perfect. That sounds like the best ideal interview. I like that method, because it's basically, they're basically looking at how you work well with their current teams, right? Which is exactly what you're going to be doing. I really like interviews that stress like how the person approaches like the kind of bugs the company sees or the kind of issues that the company experience, like rather than, I've been in a lot of interviews where, like I'm solving, rocket propulsion problems, and then I get the job and I'm just like, moving Excel spreadsheets, right? So what's like, it's so alien, it's so much more advanced what I did at the interview than what I'm actually doing on the job. You just need like someone to, you just need someone to, to monitor the build machine, right? Like just be honest and say, this is all you're going to be doing is monitoring the build machine, right? We actually don't even need your coding skills, right? So I really like those. I really like that interview you had. That sounds like, that's really brilliant. I wish more companies would do that.
I'm curious now, now that you're in a leadership position, how you leverage your experience and efficiency as well as your technical proficiency in your role. Like what skills make you a good leader beyond being extremely technically capable?
I think for me, it's being able to clearly articulate problems. So a lot of the times when you're building a complex project or a product, it's, wrapping your head around like what you need to solve and like sort of taking a big problem and breaking it down into manageable, smaller problems. And so that's something that I think is a combination of just sort of like, being a fan of architecture, being a fan of, building things from the ground up. But I think also a lot of it is soft skill of being able to talk to the designer's issues, as well as being able to talk to a very technical, maybe even like hardware-based issue. And so like being able to sort of shift the audience at a dime is a soft skill that I think is really, really valuable in this space, because at the end of the day, yeah, you're dealing in zeros and ones, but you're also just as equally dealing in people. And so if you need something that's solved and a part of it is, a design perspective of it, you need to be able to talk to that person just as clearly as you talk to your other engineers. You need to be able to talk to leadership and, the CEO at a level that they are familiar with and that they can understand. And so I'd say that that's probably the thing that sort of sets me aside as a leader, because I sort of have these different levels and layers in which I talk to people, so that things can keep moving. And so I think that's actually a bit of a PM tool as well. So while working at Microsoft as a PM, that was sort of like one of the number one things that they teach you is that like when you're building a PowerPoint deck, or when you're building these things where you're communicating to leadership versus communicating to your team, it needs to be able to speak to different audiences.
Yep, people like Evie are worth their weight in gold. That's what I always say. So I've worked with a lot of technical managers, and literally the best ones are the ones that have those soft skills, and they're actually very rare because it's the kind of work we do kind of attracts the introvert and quiet types that aren't very good at like the soft skills. So these are the people you tend to find like, probably 98% of the time in management positions. They're actually not very good at these management positions. So it's a very difficult skill to master. And so that's why I say people like Evie are worth their weight in gold, because once you master it, it's a joy working with those people who have the soft skills, who can talk to the programmer the way they like to be spoken to, with just the numbers and the data, and then talk to the artist and explain just what they just explained to the programmer, to the artist and the designers, and then also go to the CEO and explain why, we don't have, we can't have that baby in 1 month by just throwing 9 women at it. That's not gonna happen. Right?
That's my favorite example from Mythical Man Month. Yes.
Exactly. So that's really, like, I think that's like the number one skill is definitely the soft skill. I think, in fact, the soft skills are probably more valuable than, I think you can get away with a little less technical ability, and like maybe 40% technical ability and 60% soft skills, and you would be like awesome.
That's probably true.
Yeah, and what I want to add to that is I think the one of the things that I feel I'm good at, and I think I've gotten that feedback, is just having enough of that technical depth to understand the complexity of the problems, to understand where they fall in priority, what are the pain points that these problems are causing to the studio, right? And then align that with the skills or the passions or the learning areas for my team, right? Like I think I'm that is something that, again, I think I'm good at least based on the feedback that I've gotten, and I think that's something very valuable, because that essentially means that the team is always learning and or doing something that they like, and or just using the skill set that they have into problems that are delivering immediate strong impact, to the positive impact to the studio. And so and similar to what was said before, you still need that technical mind and understanding of what's going on to make that happen in an efficient way, and propel both the product forward as well as the team's careers forward. But yeah, there's definitely not that need to understand and collaborate with your team to see what are the passions, what are the skills, and what are their areas of opportunity.
Yeah. In addition to all of that, I was very lucky to be able to get a master's in business. Got a technology, an MBA, a technology management MBA from University of Washington. And one of the things that I was fortunate to learn is things like communication, negotiation, as well as having an ethical framework. How do you make decision ethically? Do you use consequentialism or Kant? That's why I like The Good Place. It's an amazing show. But yeah, having all of those skills that are not really technical skills at all, and they're very super important when working with the rest of your team, especially when your team consists mostly of people who probably don't have the same amount of skill in communication. One of the books that I recently read that changed everything to me, the way that I communicate with people and the way that I deal with others, is a book called Nonviolent Communication. And I think Marshall Rosenberg, I think that's the author. And in that book, it really lays out a way to not just communicate your needs to other people, but also how can you filter what they're saying and turn it into needs so that you can address them. And that was very valuable for me to read, and I wish I've read it a lot earlier in my career.
So just about at the end here, we're going to move over to a Q&A section. I want to give everyone a chance. We'll do, actually, no, we'll move right to the Q&A, but I want to give everyone a reminder that we have our voting for different charities that's going on right now. So we can go around really quick and everyone can just say the charity that they've nominated and why they've chosen to nominate it. And someone will place the link in the Twitch chat for everybody watching to vote on the charity, and we'll announce who has won at the end. So Evie, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I chose Save the Children. So one of my concerns, and I think it's sort of the world's concerns right now, is that, since kids don't have access to school, For a lot of kids, that's where they got lunch. That's where, that was their safe space, things of that nature. And so I wanted to donate to a cause that would make sure that during this pandemic, kids are still getting fed, still getting sort of the shelter and opportunities that they need to thrive while we're in the midst of this. So, yeah.
Abdullah?
Well, I chose the Equal Justice Initiative. During last June, I watched the movie Just Mercy because I didn't grow up in the US. So I wanted to learn a little bit about the history of the struggles of Black people in America. So one of the things that I watched was Just Mercy. And I also watched a documentary about the lawyer that the story is actually about, Brian Stevenson, and his organization, Equal Justice Initiative, where this organization is a nonprofit that represents people who have been illegally convicted or unfairly sentenced in state jails and prisons. And especially during this time, I thought it was something, it's something that I feel very strongly about these days.
Thanks. And Ayo?
I chose America Needs You because they fight for economic mobility for ambitious first-generation college students, and they are helping college students, first generation. Usually these are like immigrants or like minorities go to college, and by providing mentorship and also intensive career development. So this is why I chose them.
And Luis?
I chose Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. I more than anything, I identify with that as an immigrant from Mexico. My story was super smooth, essentially, with Microsoft sponsoring my work visa and eventually my green card, and after that, citizenship. But I know that's not the case for the vast majority of immigrants that are trying to be in this country and be a productive member of society in this country. And so that's why I am supporting this cause. Yeah.
All right, so we'll move to Q&A. Try to go through it somewhat quickly so we can get to most people's questions, maybe having one or two people answer each one. And if you have any questions and you're watching, feel free to drop them in the Twitch chat. The first one here, I'll read it as it is. It says, what would be in a good portfolio oriented to video game dev? Because sometimes we think about only doing some games with Unity or Unreal, but a game has a lot more to it. So maybe doing a portfolio oriented to backend, graphics, performance, etc., would be good as a game dev portfolio.
I'll bite.
Go ahead.
I think that have you contributed to an open source game engine out there? Is your name on GitHub somewhere contributing to game libraries, game development libraries, not necessarily developing games, but developing tools that other people use to create games? And there's a lot of them that are open source and available online. Are you contributing to them? Or have you created a Unity plugin that it's not really a game or anything like that, but it's a library that people can use in their game somehow? You don't have to build a big game or publish a game or something like that to show your value to others. You can do all of these small things that actually helps other developers too out there. And doing those small things shows your skill too, and it's actual code out there.
And there are some other things in addition to Unity and Unreal. There's Vuforia, so you can use that to make an AR experience, a small AR plugin. Anything helps. So I think Vuforia, Google also has.
There's an open source engine. There's Monogame. There is Stride. All of those are open source game engines out there. Are you contributing to them? Yeah.
So the next question is, what advice would you give to an experienced engineer who doesn't currently work in games, but is interested in getting into the industry? Go ahead, Luis.
I was kind of on that boat before I started in Xbox. I work in office for I think 5 years before I applied for my first role in Xbox, and I think the two things I'd say. One, as a software engineer in any field, you probably have relevant experience for different portions of a game. Like at this point, especially once you go to mid-size or large size or AAA game studios, there's going to be engineering components across every single engineering discipline, software engineering discipline. And so you probably already have that skill. So that you already partially there, right? The other thing is what was just mentioned about like use that to build, if you cannot build a game, maybe build components in your area of expertise that can be used for a game, or grab components from other people, at the Unity store or open source projects, etc. Right? To build a game by contributing with your area of expertise, and then use that as a portfolio and say, hey, I built this part of the game. I have experience with whatever, services or databases or something, and that's the portion of work that I put into this game, right, to get there. So in my particular example, I think that I had a ton of experience with web development. It was back when Office and SharePoint were starting to move into the web version of the Office applications, right? So I gained a lot of experience during those 5 years I was there. And so essentially I applied for jobs in the web, essentially in Xbox.com and similar web properties for Xbox. And that's something that got me there. And it could have been a different thing for maybe services or some other web related technology, right? That got me there, right? And from there, I essentially been doing the same thing as I jump from in my different roles. Like I try to find something that I am familiar with and that will open the door to learn something new, right? So from web, I ended up working on avatars for web, just like integrating a 3D library for rendering characters, but I didn't know anything about rendering. And I learned about that through that project. And so then after that, I went and actually avatars proper, and I was in the rendering engine and so on and so forth. So there's always going to be something that you already know that's applicable. It's just, use that something, bring in all the other components and like pieces that you need to build a gaming app or a gaming portfolio or a gaming component, and then show that off.
Yeah,
Yes, I believe the previous questions mentioned Unity and Unreal. Also, Luna G for Vulkan development, very, very useful. So just Google Luna G and play around with any of the tutorials on all those three, like Vulkan, Unity, Unreal.
Yeah, and I just want to add in there is that you don't have to necessarily start by building a game on your own. A lot of the times the energy of the game company is actually really one of the most appealing parts of it. So I'm a big game jammer and hackathon nut. And we have some really, really good ones in the area. But I think they're probably even more accessible now because you don't have to necessarily go to a place, because everybody is opting for these game jams and hackathons that are online, where you find your team online and you sort of work together in a distributed manner while we get through the pandemic. So they're still happening. Hackathons, game jams are still happening all over the place. They're excellent ways of getting sort of breaking into the industry, working with people that may already have a job in industry, and then also people that are just trying to get in like you. And so, yeah, I really appreciate those. Historically, I've used game jams as a means of almost serving as like an interview, where it's just like, I'm gonna build a game with you in 48 hours, and if I like you, maybe I'll hire you for something. And so, yeah, especially in Seattle, I can speak towards the IGDA chapter here and the Seattle VR community here. It's very, very focused and targeted towards trying to broaden participation All of their events are super inclusive, and they just get better every year. So.
We have a question here from a recent grad student that asks, would you suggest focusing on pursuing a master's degree or trying to get some experience in the industry instead?
Can I start? Okay, so yeah, I'm really excited about this question. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I actually have a PhD. I got my PhD in my dissertation topic was socially pervasive games. So I'm one of the few PhDs in game design. Fun stuff. And I can say from my experience that one, it's 100% not necessary. If you wanted to get into industry with a 4-year degree, that is perfectly fine. But for me, it was super valuable. And the things that, the reason why is because that extra time helped me to sort of really deep dive into learning how to learn. So once you get into the grad school level, like at a master's level, you're really sort of targeting and concentrating on one specific area and getting really, really good with that area. By PhD, you're trying to become the expert in something. So you're trying to teach other people something at that point. You're learning how to do research, and you're essentially just learning how to learn, because at that point, when you get to that level, after a while, your professors have nothing else to teach you. At this point, you're teaching them. And that is a very worthwhile experience to have that dedicated time where you can learn, focus on yourself and learning how you best learn, and how you best put thoughts together and how to articulate those thoughts and turn it into a dissertation, which is basically a giant novel that you write that maybe nobody ever reads, but it's pretty good and you're pretty proud of it. Yeah, I do think that time was well spent. I also think that it led me towards understanding the type of work environments that I want to create in industry, because that sort of research-oriented environment, that sharing of ideas and things of that nature, that was something I fell in love with, and I didn't expect it, but now I look for it everywhere I go.
And to add on to what Evie said, if you're planning to go into AI, like deep learning, then yes, you probably need a master's degree. So everybody I met at my current company that works on AI deep learning, they are all masters and PhDs. So it's almost like you can't get in there without a master's degree. If you're planning to go into games like I did, just kind of like to figure out what area of expertise you want to specialize in. I'm a specialist in optimization and debugging and performance. So just graphic stuff, you probably do not need a master's. You could probably just get by with your bachelor's degree. Of course, people are going to say, well, you got yours like over 20 years ago. So what do you know about today's world? So that's actually true. So this might be, outdated information. But yes, I actually have met people in the industry who not only have just first degrees, but I've actually met people who have no degrees and they're doing well in the industry. So just thought I'll throw that out there.
I have another question. What challenges do people face switching to a manager role during the COVID era? This is probably quite a long list, but I think Luis raised their hand first.
Yeah, I think I think for me and for a lot of people, a lot of managers at Microsoft, one of the biggest challenges is just so at Microsoft, essentially all managers, we have like these 3 focus areas that are about essentially coach, model, and care. And so I think during the COVID era, that I care about my reports, I care about my team, has just grown like so much, or has to grow so much, right? But the other 2 don't shrink, right? The other 2 are still there, and they're still equally important. And so I think that's that has been one of the main challenges, like being super deliberate about always asking the team, are you okay? how are things going, outside of work, do you need time, are you overloaded, do you need help, how was the weekend, right? Like stuff like that. Like the first few minutes in each one-on-one that I have with my team now is just about how are you doing, are you okay, right? And just getting that through and realizing how important that is in these very complex times we are living. It was a challenge initially because we're not used to that. We just assume everybody's okay. We focus on business and we move on, right? And so just adding that component or growing that component of caring is something that was very challenging, and also challenging because as you spend that that emotional energy on making sure the rest of the people around you are okay, sometimes there's no emotional energy left for you, right? And so it can be very draining. So you have to be aware of that balance and just make sure that the team is okay. Something that in the studio, like all the way from senior leadership all the way down, he said is if we take care of the team, the product will take care of itself, like essentially. So
my biggest challenge during this time is that I was diagnosed with ADHD last year. 36 years of my life, and I didn't know that I had one, that I had ADHD. So trying to treat it during this time and knowing what's the best meds for you during this time was a big challenge, especially since there's so much distractions. I got my games, I got my consoles, especially during this time. There are so many gadgets coming out right now and game related stuff that it's just so easy to distract yourself with them, and focusing on the work at hand in a place where you also live. I don't have space for an office. So this is my bedroom. So seeing my bed and wanting to sleep every time I look at it is just very challenging.
Another question. Oh, Evie, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to second the idea that empathy is everything right now. So as Luis said, the making sure that your people are okay. I mean, that's something that I kind of feel like I carried into it before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, everyone's going to go through sort of these mood swings. I don't know a better word for it. Is that, everybody's going to sort of switch between feeling really grateful that they are one of the few people that has a job right now, to just being stir crazy because they're at home and maybe they're with their kids or their annoying dog that won't shut up, to just all of the feelings in between. And just being prepared for that, I think, is something that's important for a manager. Is that they're going to feel different things, and they might feel guilty about it, and they might feel like they're not being as productive as they need to be, but giving them that space to sort of figure out like what do you need to make things feel more normal. Is it a matter of like, working during the day while there's daylight and all of your kids are around? Maybe that's a problem, adjusting your work hours somehow, or, just figuring out the ways of, people working and still functioning in this time, because it's going to be different. And while they're adjusting, it's going to be challenging at sometimes people will feel great, sometimes they'll feel lousy and they can't get anything done. And just being able to work through that is a skill, and we're all learning it at the same time.
Another question sort of related to the health of our developers, but do you have opinions on crunch time at game companies? Luis?
Yes. Very negative opinions about crunch time. It's why I'm at Magic Leap now. I escaped. No, just kidding. But yes, crunch mode is terrible. You want to stop it.
I have so many opinions. The one thing I will say is that first of all, yes, it's very negative. It's the enemy. It's bad. And I think the industry is finally realizing that. I think one of the key things to fight crunch, and that can happen at any level, whether you're just starting in the industry, whether you're a leader, etc., is to realize how game development is a collaborative endeavor rather than something that can only be fixed by spitting out more code and doing it faster and hiring more developers and burning out more, right? Like things like, not everything has to be a software engineering problem. Not everything has to be an art production problem, right? Like you can, if you're doing responsible planning, that's a great way to prevent crunch, right? As games are moving into games as service, when you have more frequent, smaller releases, that sounds great in theory, but then some studios are turning into, because we're always releasing, we're always crunching, and that's bad, right? So what do? Well, you plan those releases very carefully, and maybe plan for some releases that are like time sensitive, like E3 release and holiday release. Maybe those you cannot move, and you make sure you only focus on very key features for those, and everything else is just gravy, right? And those releases in between, you can shift. It can be quality driven or feature driven, and you can ship whenever, etc., right? So that's just one of the tools. There's a lot of other tools that you can do, but that's just an example of not everything is a coding problem, not everything is an art problem, right? Like attack the responsible release management across all these different angles, collaborate with the rest of the disciplines in the team, and then you'll get into a really healthy release cadence where quality keeps improving, teamwork keeps improving, etc., right? And then crunch will really be a rare, awful exception that maybe you still have to do, but it will be like such a distant thing that it won't be, it won't be synonymous with the gaming industry anymore.
Yeah, crunch has basically, as Luis said, crunch basically just highlights that you're just terrible at planning. So maybe you should stop planning and get someone else to do the planning, because honestly, it's I've been on games where it was basically just 5-month crunch, and I literally just quit the company because I couldn't handle it, and I literally was like, I would rather be unemployed than work here. Like it's been really bad. Luckily I think the industry overall has realized that this is a problem that they just have to tackle. So now it's a lot better in a lot of all these game studios. But it's just like a nightmare for most people because you have to have a life after, you can't just be working all the time. And studies have shown that it actually doesn't even give you that much benefit. So usually when we're crunching, we're basically adding in bugs from 9 o'clock till midnight. We're just adding in bugs that we're going to be fixing tomorrow, right? So what's the point, right? Well, like it's just frustrating. Like it's sad that so many people don't understand that problem, that you're actually not gaining any productivity by having more hours. You're just adding more bugs that you're just going to have to fix later on. So
Right.
So that is all the time that we have, but I'd like to go around one more time for everyone to have a chance to give final plugs of where people can connect with you online, or where they can find the content that you're making. And I'll go in the same order. So Evie, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. So I think my handle is Parasite Evie, because I really like that game, Parasite Eve, and it's my name. And then let's see, you can sort of keep track of what I'm doing if you go to propriovision.com. That's a website for the medical device company that I work on. And then I'd say feel free to tweet at me, LinkedIn at me, and I'd be happy to hear from you.
Abdullah? You're muted.
I'm Indie Saudi on Twitter, that's where you can find me. I also just released a series of videos for programmers, especially .NET programmers who want to learn how to use Unity and C# in Unity. yeah, and I encourage everybody to go to the .NET website and go to the game development section and look at all the different things that you can leverage with .NET with game development, not just Unity, but everything else. And yeah, so that's kind of what the type of content that I create. I hope you like it.
That's awesome. Thanks. Io, you're next.
I'm actually very hard to find on the internet. So I have a hidden LinkedIn. So, but just for the next couple of weeks or maybe months, I would take it from its hidden status so everybody can find me on LinkedIn.
And Luis?
Yeah, and so I'm so Twitter, I'm Angel Mex Luis, one word, so like my name but Luis at the end, and I'm also very active on Instagram, Luis Angel Mex, just one word, and also you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm super happy to be here again, and I'm closing again, showing the stuff that we shipped today. It's awesome, and I'm so happy. So
yay!
Yeah,
Congratulations!
Yeah,
I just received mine today, so I'm gonna go play after this.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to throw it back to Ben, and hopefully he has the results for the charity poll that's been in the chat and can give us some information on what our next panel is.
I do. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to all of our panelists this evening. So the results of this evening's charity donation are we're going to actually be splitting it in half. We had a tie between Save the Children and the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. So each of those organizations will be receiving a $250 donation. And then we've got a couple upcoming events with IGDA Seattle. We're going to be having the final Becoming panel next month, and it's going to be with diverse leaders from the video game industry who work in business development. So focusing on a slightly different aspect of the industry than we've looked at before. And then in January, we're going to be hosting a first of a kind event for us, where we are going to be doing a international collaboration between IGDA Seattle and the video game development community in Mexico, so that we can do a meet and greet and have an opportunity for some cross-border collaboration there. So keep an eye open on our website and our LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook for more information on that as we get the details nailed down. So thank you all very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank you all.